everyone, and welcome to this conversation presented by White House Custom Color. I'm Jed Toffer. Thanks for listening. You know, my wife Vicki and I have owned and operated our photography studio, V Gallery, for 20 years now. White House has been our lab for the last 16 of those years, and we could not be happier. White House is a family-run business, just like ours. If you haven't already, check them out at WHCC.com. And if you want to drop me a line, feel free to email me at jed@WHCC.com. There are many things I love about Josh Hanna. He's nice. He's funny. He's a great photographer and an absolutely gifted compositor. But I think my favorite things about him are that he's grounded, self-aware, and honest. To me, the best thing about photography in general is that it's about so much more than photos. Josh embodies this. And we can talk about it all day, but at the end of the day, Josh lives it. That's a beautiful thing. I think you'll hear quite a bit that you can relate to in this one, friends. And that might be the best thing about Josh. He's so relatable. Enjoy. How long have you been in business?
I started as a side business in like 2007.
Yeah.
So I was working for a bank, and I mentioned to you,
Right.
I worked for a bank for like 16 years, and
Yeah.
so started that in the side to where it was like almost working 2 full-time jobs at
Yeah.
one point, and having to make that decision. So like December 2012 is when I left that job.
Mm-hmm. When you jumped into photography, even in 2007, were you drawn in because of the camera side or post-production side?
So I started my official business in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
I was into photography, back in film, before digital was even out.
Okay.
The problem was it was like $14 to develop a roll of film, and like each roll was like $7. I'm working part-time at a grocery store.
Right.
Like, this just isn't conducive to, like,
Right.
I love this, but
Right.
I might develop 10 rolls of film a year because that's what I
Right.
could form. So,
Right.
This steep learning curve of, and there was nobody in the area that could, like, really guide me, like, here's how you do this, here's what thing, like, manual camera control was like this thing of wizardry to me, like,
Right.
and nobody could explain it.
Right.
And so when digital came out, like, I remember dropping $800 on the absolute worst digital camera Kodak ever made because I thought it was so awesome. Like, I get to immediately see the results of this picture,
Yeah. It was a huge deal.
It was really big. And it was the crap. Like, I'm so elated to have this thing, right? And then it's like after 2 days, it's like,
But it's junk.
yeah, I paid all this money.
Yeah.
And like, I'm so excited to see the pictures.
Yeah.
I'm like, why do they look
Yeah.
so bad?
It was almost like you were paying all that money for a concept.
Right.
Right? Like the concept of being able to immediately see what it is that you captured
Yeah.
was amazing.
Yeah.
And then the result, the actual result, the quality, especially in a relative sense, was so terrible
Right.
that at the time there was very little that you could realistically do with it from a professional standpoint.
Yeah. But the beauty of it was that immediate feedback.
Yeah.
Like, this looks bad. This looks good. Like, what if I shot from like, I remember shooting, like, because I never photographed people at all. And I swore I never would.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah. I wanted nothing to do with talking to people, photographing people, being in their company. Like, I was so antisocial, you know what I mean? And so I would, like, photograph, leaves and flowers and, like, all the things that a lot of us start out because
Yeah.
we think photography is interesting. And
Right.
so I remember having this digital camera and, like, photographing, like, daisies and things, like, from underneath.
Yeah.
And, like, you're starting to see, like, this is interesting. Like, learning about perspectives and how that
Right.
shift changes the viewer's viewpoint and all this kind
Right.
of. And so that immediate feedback was just, like, it was bait for me, you know what I mean? Like, this hook that was like, I've got to, like.
Was it helping you to see composition and light and things of that nature without, having to wait because of the immediate feedback? Like right away, you were able to see those and study those sorts of things almost in real time.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it took the learning curve almost away immediately, right? Because I think it helped me. Like, I think people are different, right? So for me, now I've learned to see light and just as it exists. And you see this, like you can see interesting window light sometimes. Like, I could photograph the crap out of this, that, you know. But before
I've seen
it wasn't,
other people experience that.
yeah,
right?
before it wasn't like that. It was like the camera helped me see the light because it was. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I know the eyes are there, but it was like for some reason seeing on the back of a screen made me be able to conceptualize like what's actually happening.
Well, you're looking at it through a lens. You're looking at it through the lens of that tool, so to speak. When did you transition, though? I mean, and maybe that's the wrong word, but at what point did you find yourself being drawn to, or maybe even realizing that you were super interested and actually gifted at manipulation?
So I didn't really get into like the digital stuff until I got into portrait work.
So that the portrait stuff happened first.
Yeah.
Which was
so if you back up like high school, I was always into like art and things like that, taking commercial art classes in high school and entering art competitions so I was always drawn to just art forms.
Right.
And photography was one of those ones I wanted to get into.
Sure.
Like my parents offered me in high school, senior year for Christmas, electric guitar or camera. Like you pick your choose your own destiny.
Right.
I picked the guitar. So
I thought for sure you were going to say I picked the camera.
No, there's so many times I look back and it's a very fitting like choose your own destiny. I'm like, had I picked the camera, I probably wouldn't have been stuck at a bank for 16 years that I hated every day. Like all these decisions would have filtered.
Maybe if you picked the camera back then, you'd be the lead guitarist in some band on the road right now, right? Would have went the other way.
Maybe. But you can't help but wonder, right?
Of course.
But anyway, so I've always been interested in those sorts of things, but I was into photography for a while, and it was well into the digital age, you know, and it's probably like, I don't know what year it would have been, 05, 06-ish, when the portrait thing came into be, which was via like a revival at church, weirdly enough. Where I was so dead set again, like I loved photography. I wanted to make it, like I was trying to figure out how to make a business out of like landscapes and things like that, right? So, which is very difficult to do, even then.
Super hard, right?
And so we're at this revival at church, and I just like felt this. You know, sometimes you just feel God like speaking. You know what I mean? It was one of those times where it's like, I want you to offer free portraits, like to people in the community that just can't get them otherwise.
Right.
And of course, my first response is like, I know nothing, like literally nothing about portraits. Like this cannot be what I need to be doing. Right. On top of that, I really don't like people.
So you're like, yeah, this message is for somebody else.
Right. Like who was sitting near me?
The wires got crossed. I overheard this one.
But anyways, it's like, okay, I'm going to give this a try. You know, it was super uncomfortable for me because I'm not really a people person. Like, it's hard for me to, like, just connect with a stranger or something like that, right? And I'm like, here I'm wanting strangers to come in.
Right.
And I need to have this connection that I don't have. Like, how is this going to work? Like,
right.
But anyways, it's just one of those things that you look back now and think, man, what a stepping stone that was. But at the time, it was just like, I'm going to do this thing. So I bought, like, some of the cool flow lights. Remember the old spirally fluorescent bulb, right? So I've got all this continuous light. I got some donations like to buy these backgrounds, like the muslins, you know, that were super wrinkled, and I had no idea how to get rid of them. And so like we hung all this stuff at our church and hung it all out, and I start doing these portraits, and they're bad. Like they're so bad. Everything was wrong with them. And so my goal was like, I'm so bad at photography. I know what'll fix it. Photoshop. I'm going to bring these babies in and learn how to edit. And like, I look back at so many, I'm like, why is everybody orange and plastic skin and like all these, you know,
all the stuff.
It's so bad. You know, I want to have this story where it's like, Oh yeah, I got into Photoshop and it was just like magic the second I touched the, you know, it totally wasn't at all. It was just a mess. And I don't think I've ever, like, I try to avoid those images, like, because they're that, like, I embarrass myself by looking at them kind of
It's
level.
not even something you can laugh about yet.
Right. It's just, it's still a sour kind of note.
I can laugh about it though.
But,
So that was really how that was born, though.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
How did it go from that to who you are now? You do things that very few people do or even can do. And I know that part of the reason that it occurred the way that it did was, well, for one thing, and this is something I think we lose sight of sometimes, is that you didn't have nobody had the ability to do what you or a very few amount of people can do now. Nobody had that ability 20 years ago because the technology did not exist.
Right.
So you're doing things on a regular daily basis that we really couldn't even conceive of in the early 2000s because the ability wasn't there. It wasn't a thing. So how did you go from wanting to fix it in Photoshop and creating orange plastic skin to creating images that blow people's minds because of the manipulation?
I think it's like anybody that takes what they do seriously just gets there. You know what I mean? I still like when I love the compliments and stuff like that, you know, but it's like you look at your own work and like, man, there's just so far to go. Like,
That's a good thing, though.
yeah, I think it is. Like, I try and remind myself.
I think it's a good thing.
You kind of get down on yourself sometimes.
Well,
like,
you don't want to do that, though.
No, and so you remind yourself, you know what I mean? Like, I need to learn. Like, I need to learn. I need to get better. But I think it was all a process of that. Like, seeing, like, yeah, this is, you know, for a while you think this is really cool. Like with Photoshop, right? Anytime you learn a new trick in Photoshop, you way overdo it for like a year. You know, that's why there's plastic skin, because you're like, oh, I can get rid of wrinkles? This is dope. Like, this is the
Wrinkles
best
are
thing.
gone.
Yeah, this is like, you look 100 years younger. Well, you look like a toy that's 100 years younger. But you do, you know, so like,
It's so true.
when I try and teach, I'm like, one thing that I've learned in editing, and if you talk to anybody who's like that I admire, that's really experienced in it, like you learn how to be light-handed. You know, you don't just throw everything at it. But so it was starting to see like what I'm doing here is not good.
Yeah.
And I think you only see that sometimes by comparing yourself to other
Sure.
people's work.
Right.
Which again can go very south or very north, right? Facebook is a dangerous game nowadays with the whole comparison thing.
Right.
But it's like seeing other people's work where I'm like how does their skin look so good but it's not orange or plastic?
Right.
Like, you know, so it just drives you to like want to figure stuff out. And then that turns into, like, for me, like movies, right? I love movies. The more epic, the better. You know, grew up watching all the action movie and explosions and the fireballs and all this kind of stuff, wizards and all this cool. And I'm like, how do I make that? You know, how do I? And that kind of like imagination part of my brain is like, what are the tools that help me make that? Like, how do I use Photoshop to, like, I remember the first composite I ever did, and I posted like so excited, like, I've always wanted to get into this, and like, this is so cool.
Right.
And it was like this crappy landscape photo that I had placed behind a crappy portrait that I had done, and the whole thing was just garbage. And I was so excited to put it on Facebook and all this. And
But again, the concept is what was firing you up.
yeah,
Because I contend that even if we would have been able to come up with that in our minds, we couldn't execute it. You know, not in a way that was even remotely meaningful. And you know, some people could do that with negatives, but it required a barrier to entry or a learning curve that was really steep.
yeah,
And so not only do we now have the ability to do the things that you do, but the barrier to entry is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. You know, you subscribe to Photoshop and Lightroom for $9.99 a month, and you have applications that are mind-blowingly powerful.
Right.
You don't know how to do it right away.
Right.
But then you also have the ability to go on YouTube and watch free videos that can show you to do anything that you're capable of searching for. You're going to find 1,000 videos to show you how to do it, essentially.
Yeah.
Right? And then it's a matter of just throwing an image in there, which is real easy now too, and didn't always used to be.
Right. Right.
So like to do that, the ability to do that is there. And now it's all about how good, what level of quality can you reach?
Right.
And so what I hear you saying is that you're constantly striving, like that's a ladder that doesn't have an end, doesn't have a top.
Yeah, I mean, that's like empowering and demoralizing at the same time.
It's scary and awesome at the same time.
You want to think like, man, I can't wait till I'm like at this pinnacle of my career where you can just like be at rest and not have to worry about it. But then it's like, that's never going to happen.
No.
Like, I hope it never happens.
In a sense, right.
I mean, let's be honest. We've all met people who feel like that they're there.
Yeah.
And then it's like they're just left with this bad taste in their mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then you meet these other people who like who we would consider genuine masters of their craft, and they're like, I don't know anything.
They're still hungry.
Right. And I'm like, let me be that guy. You know what I mean? Let me be. I don't ever want to feel like it's good enough because it's not. I mean, you're your own worst critic. You look at your work and it's like all I see is the things wrong with it. I don't see the things right.
But you pointed to this earlier. Is there not a fine line between being your own worst critic, right, and between that and shame? Like, is there not a fine line between critiquing your work, your own work, and the shame piece, which is just like, oh, that's junk and I'm junk and what am I even doing? Like, is it not easy to drift into that?
Yeah, it's very thin. Like, so one side of that's very healthy and the other is very unhealthy, right?
Right.
The unhealthy side's like the people I talk to who just are doing killer stuff and just feel like it's crap.
Right.
They feel like I can't compete with what I'm seeing other people doing, or I don't want to enter photo competition because there's just so, they see the GIAs and they see the top 10 of everything. And it's like, I can't compete with that. Right. It's like, you may be a year into this and you're trying to compete with people who have been doing this for 20 years or something. Like, let's get expectations where they need to be. It's good that you don't think that you're the master of the universe.
Right.
That's a good thing.
Right.
But the healthy approach to that is like, how do I get better? How do I get there? How do I use that as inspiration, like fuel to be better, not fuel to burn yourself down?
So how do you stay in the healthy space?
It's not easy some days. Like I'm susceptible to that like anybody. I think most people people lend to kind of one of two sides in the photography world. One is like more the technical business end of things, and one's more like the artistic side end of things.
Sure.
And the best businesses are the ones that can blend those two beautifully, right? So I hate the business side of things. Like, it just stresses me to no end. I just want to sit and like make stuff, And so I'm very susceptible to those feelings of like, man, I'm following these guys. Their stuff's awesome. Like, just if I go down that rabbit hole, like it'll depress me. Like, really? I'll spend a day or two of just like, man, I don't want to do anything. Like, I don't want to do anything because it's just not up to the par that I want it to be.
Right.
And I mean, it takes a lot of prayer for me a lot of times, like just God reminding, like, just like your faith walk, right? It's a journey, it's a learning experience.
So you got to pull yourself out of that,
right?
Or get pulled out of it.
I find that you rarely get pulled out of it.
Yeah,
you have to pull yourself out.
That's interesting. Yeah,
and it's just you have to just remind yourself, what's real, what isn't real, what's social media is not real. You're not going to see somebody's feed where all they're posting is their failures. You're getting the highlight of the successes, right?
That would actually be very maybe that might be
start doing
that might be something that really stands out.
I've considered making an account just for that. Like, here's where I screwed up today. Here's the 112th
Today,
time I've screwed up today. Here's, just to be like real for, you know what I mean? Like, so we have these crazy expectations on ourselves to try and compete with things that aren't even real.
Right.
I think that's the hard point for people to get past is, I mean, how could you live up to that expectation?
Right. It's not possible in the first place.
Even if you take the top tier photographers, right, who have like crazy sponsorships and we like look up to these pillars of the community,
right?
Their social media feed is fake.
Right.
That's not life.
Right.
Life can't be 100% successes, achievements, goals met every day of your life forever.
It's like an advertisement.
Right.
Essentially.
Yeah.
You said earlier that you hate the business part.
Oh yeah.
But it's necessary.
Unfortunately.
So how do you handle that?
As little as possible.
I mean, did somebody do that for you?
No.
So you do it.
Yeah.
You take care of it begrudgingly.
Yeah. Right. That's the key phrase there.
Is it your weakness? Or
It very much
is it a weakness?
Oh yeah.
In your business in general is what? How does it manifest? The numbers, the accounting, the sales. What?
Yes.
Yes to all. All of the above. D.
Yeah.
All of the above.
Yeah. I mean, so like sales aren't. But I don't mind sales. And I do kind of like a pseudo IPS, and so I can get behind the technique of selling your work and things like that, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the numbers and tracking expenses and taxes and like all this, like, how can I spend as little time on this as possible?
Doing
right.
That, right.
And now the downfall to that for me as a business owner is like, it places a ceiling on what I can do.
Creatively.
Creatively, but also like as a business, as somebody that would, I would love to get to like the next tier of business. But just like with art, you can't get to the next tier of art without putting in the hours and putting in the work and learning and developing. And I'm shunning all of the responsibility from the business side to do all that. So I realize it caps myself to a degree of what's possible for me in business.
So given that, is it not an option for you to, because do you have any employees?
No.
Okay. What I don't mean to do is imply any sort of advice here.
Sure.
What I'm trying to do for myself even is to throw out what an option would be.
Right.
Because you are talking potentially to a lot of people that this resonates with a lot. If I was in your situation, it would resonate with me a lot. And so I put myself in your shoes, and I don't think it's very hard for me to do that given my own personality and strengths and weaknesses. And I think to myself, would it not be an option to hire somebody to do the proverbial things that I don't like to do, sort of thing, so that I did then have more time to do the things that I did like to do and the things that I excelled at?
Right.
Is that a thing in your mind?
Yeah. I mean, I've considered it a lot, and it's like, so here's admitting another fault time. Okay. In spite of hating to do that and everything, like I'm pretty much like a control freak over like my thing.
Okay, right.
So while I don't want to do that, and it would be smarter for somebody else to do it, and I've considered it so many times, at the same time, it's like, I don't want anyone else to have that control. Even though they would have better control, it would be smarter control. Right. It's just it's honestly a flaw. Like, I get that.
Right.
And trying to work around that is its own challenge, but I think that for me personally, like, that's the problem. Like, I just don't want to relinquish that control to somebody else to make those decisions. Right. Even though they would be better decisions. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. And again, I think that's something that a lot of people, I think that would be a big reason that a lot of people in your scenario would say is the reason they don't do it, or they haven't really acted upon that. Even despite the fact that they could see the potential benefits from it. That control piece is a big piece that I think a lot of creatives, a lot of artists share.
Right.
Given all that, then, Is it something where you think you're just likely to continue to do things the way that they are and do it begrudgingly and just handle it, so to speak, and push through, so to speak?
Probably yes. Just knowing myself and being honest. Like,
Right, that's right.
Because I'm gonna qualify this, right? Because it's not like I'm unhappy.
Okay.
Okay. If I were unhappy or unsatisfied, like with where I am and all this,
Right.
I think it would be a completely different story.
Right.
But the problem is, like, I'm happy. Like,
That sounds like a good problem to have.
yeah, I mean, God's just blessed us to this point where it's like everything's been so good. Would my giving up that control of that point in order to grow to another tier of business bring me like any unsettlement from relinquishing that control? Or because if I get somebody really good at business involved, okay?
Yeah.
I've been in business long enough now to know what needs to be done.
Yeah. Right.
And so I know what somebody good at business is going to tell me needs to be done.
You
right?
already know it. I already know it. Right.
I already, like, the sad thing is I know what needs to be done myself if I would just buckle down and do it.
I
But
get it. Yes.
it would make me so miserable to do it. And so it doesn't really matter if I'm hiring somebody else to tell me to do that. Then you're going to make me miserable. So why not just...
In a sense, you're in a position where why try to fix what isn't broken?
Right.
You know, it's flawed here and there. Sure, there's issues here and there, but you're happy. You're satisfied. You're content.
Right. And I think that's the key, right? Like, would it be awesome to make $2 million a year?
Yeah.
Be pretty phenomenal.
Pretty great. Yeah.
There's photographers that do that,
Yeah.
and it blows my mind.
Yes.
It really does.
Yeah.
Would I trade that for just being content with what I'm doing?
Right.
I hopefully never.
Right.
You know, if I make $1,000 a year, but yet God provides what we need, and like everything's taken care of, and like we're just happy, like,
Yeah.
to me, like, that's the win. You know, so like I get the weaknesses and I get all this, but it's like how for my own mental sanity and for just like my being and how do I satisfy that? Is just like do the things that anger me and like distress me as little as possible. Do the things that feel like they give me some meaning more.
Of course.
So.
What is something, though, in contrast to that? What is something that you know that you need to do or that you should do or that would be good for you or your business or your family that you do plan to implement or that you do plan to integrate into your business or your life? Because I've been asking this question to some degree because here we are, the beginning of 2020. So not only a new year, but a new decade.
Right.
Right. And I've heard the complaints from 2019 and before. And sometimes I feel like, well, that's what we say every year. You know, that last year was such a difficult year for this, that, and the other. And 2020 is going to be so different and it's going to be so much better.
Yeah.
And I understand that is sometimes as cynical as it comes across to me. But I have issues with my own jadedness to some degree. So I get it. But putting all of that aside and considering and focusing more on what we were just talking about, what is something that you need to, or that you plan to or want to implement that isn't going to, in your mind, risk you being content or you being happy, but needs to be done or that you want to do?
So I'm probably not. So this has been a time for me too, like where I'm thinking a lot about like, you know, what's the future? Where do things go? And to be honest, the past year for me has been a lot of, you know, is this industry still right for me? Like, am I still happy doing this?
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean it. And it's not. So I'm not one of those guys who's like, oh, these cheap people are killing the industry.
Right. You're not saying that.
I'm not trying to be one of those like.
You're not saying
doom
that.
and gloom names. I'm talking about for me personally
Right.
and my future. Like, is it still here? You know, like you said, beginning of the new year is a great time to reevaluate.
Yeah.
Right. So part of that reevaluation that I've been trying to do every year is like, okay, God, is this the path? Like, is this still the path? Because, you know, to date of my involvement in this industry it's been awesome. Like things that have happened and projects I've got to work on, people I've got to meet. Like there's been so many incredible things. But I don't want to think that like that's a limitation. In other words, of I can only do this, because I've seen what it's to go from something so extreme, like working in the corporate world and stuff and this extreme change. And I'm thinking, like, is there possible to have another extreme change that's even more beneficial and more satisfying?
Really, yeah.
And not saying that that's the case, but is it possible?
Right.
Like sometimes I think we limit what we think we can do in a year because we just put a ceiling on the possibility of what it is.
Right.
And so I don't know that there's a business change I would implement, but there's a lot of theoretical change, more or less, of, what if, like my big one is like, what if I satisfy the creative side more and push more towards like a fine art? Like even if it's not portrait, I've been experimenting with like fine art stuff, like seeing like, is there something here? Because I feel this drawn nature to it.
Yeah.
Like, is there something here that's more satisfying even than
what you're doing
than the other?
Right.
Now, I don't think being a photographer, portrait artist, whatever you want to call it, I don't think that's ever going to go away, because I do feel just like a solid connection to that.
Right.
But it's like,
what else could it look like?
How does what I offer as a business change?
Right.
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 And so what I was saying when I come in to some of the conversation earlier, there was this idea about, which I've been pushing for years too. Like you're not selling. We talked about last night.
Yeah.
You're not selling somebody a piece of paper.
Right.
Right. You're selling the idea, the context of what that paper represents,
Right.
and the art that's on it.
Right.
And I'm just trying to push more that direction of what's the other content that could contain.
Well, in the background to that conversation, which just happened to me yesterday, I had someone come up and say that a fairly prominent person was saying that you shouldn't, because you can't realistically sell products anymore that your clients can get easily from other big vendors, or like even like to go to a Walmart or a Costco, or that they have access to in other avenues. Like you shouldn't sell those because it's not going to work for you. And it boiled my blood.
Yeah.
Because I think that is so misinformed.
Right.
And I think that mindset is capable of really crushing the industry, because all of a sudden then you're putting yourself in a position where you are selling merely the paper or the canvas or the wrap or whatever product it is that your clients now have access to through various outlets online or whatever, when that is not at all what we should be, even in our minds, thinking that we're selling. We're selling an experience. We're selling the essence of an image that we can offer, printed on various mediums, right?
Well, it's like going to Toyota and say you shouldn't sell Lexus because you can get a Chevy down the street.
Right.
I mean, I relate it to that.
Because they're both cars.
Exactly. They're both going to get you to the grocery store and home.
Right.
What's the point of spending? And what is the difference? I always like the car comparison, because what is the difference?
Yeah.
You've got one crowd of people who are perfectly happy with that Chevy.
Yep.
They love it.
Yep.
It's their dream come true.
Right.
And they got a $150 a month payment, and they're just happy.
Right.
And then you got another crowd of people who's like, yeah, I want to get to the store and get home too, but I'm going to do it in style.
Yeah, right.
And I want the heated leather seats, and I want like plush, and I want to feel this steering wheel that feels like silky leather in my hand. And they're going to pay 10 times as much to get the experience and the craftsmanship and like everything they perceive of value.
The dealership is different. The sales experience is different. All the associations that you have with those two vehicles are different.
Right.
It's about the essence of all of that, as opposed to the fact that you're sitting in a chair holding onto a steering wheel and traveling from A to B.
Right.
Right?
And so that's if I had to say like, what do I want to change in my business? It's continuing to push that direction.
That piece.
Right. How do I turn this experience and this final product into something that even transcends what I thought was possible last year or the past 10 years.
So that's also
whatever.
kind of a ladder.
Yes.
It doesn't have a top.
Right.
Right? That's a never-ending stairway that you're constantly traversing upwards.
Right. So there's like a couple painters that I follow, right, who sell. I wanted to buy one of their pieces at one point, and so I hit their website. And it's like, I don't have like 50 grand
that's
on
not
your
gonna
painting,
work.
dude. I love it, but
Right.
But then it gets me thinking, like, why am I not thinking about my own work on those terms?
Yes.
And not just saying, okay, the portrait that I do are good enough, I'm just going to start pushing these prices. But more, how does my work change to help influence that as well?
Allison Tyler Jones said one of the best things that I've heard on this podcast when she brought up the fact that you don't want the mindset where you're saying, how can I charge $5,000 for that? She said, turn that into, how can I create something that's legitimately worth $5,000?
Yeah, exactly.
And that blew my mind.
Right.
Because I think primarily I had been thinking all these years more along the lines of the first case. Not even, I don't know, not intentionally, but more as a result of not considering the second case and focusing on that. And how much more amazing is that when you frame it that way?
Well, it's a perspective shift, right? Because the first way is thinking what I do is good enough.
Right.
Start giving me more money. Which, let's face it, like little to no risk, all reward.
Right. Perfectly put, yes.
But the other side of that is responsibility is on me now and me solely to create something, to innovate something, to whatever word you want to put in there that someone's going to see the true value in.
Right.
And so I think that goes back to the mentality of, like, if we ever reach a point where we're stagnant and think that what we're doing is good enough, like, it's just going to be our downfall.
Then you're done.
Right.
In a sense.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about So Many Angels here.
Yeah. So it's been an interesting ride thus far, right? Because, Matt Myers, we all know and love.
Yeah.
Like, comes up to me at Sync, like, we'd never really spoken before. We kind of knew each other through Facebook and stuff, seen each other there. And he's like, I've got this idea. He's like, you got 2 minutes, I can show you something. And I'm like, sure. And he shows me this video that he's putting together, like, and explains, like, we want to photograph kids with cancer and, like, transform them. And, like, he's like, I know you do a lot of Photoshop work and composites and stuff. And I'm like, you had me at superhero.
Yeah. That's so great.
Like, if you would have came and just said, like, I want somebody to turn me into a superhero, I'm like, I'm in. I'm
down with that.
Right. Back to the whole movie mentality, like the things that excite me, right? So, and the fact that it had this extra layer of, like, service behind it, But even more than that, like, just his heart behind the thing, right?
You can see it.
Yeah, it's just... And I've told him, like, this thing doesn't exist without you.
Right.
I mean, you're kind of the heart of this thing.
Right.
And so that was like the first interaction, right? So we start doing some edits, and I start seeing some of the reactions that he's posting of the kids getting their edits, and then I had a chance at, like, the Sync the next year to go photograph kids with him, which I was kind of sketchy on because it's like, I know this is going to be difficult probably to see and be a part of, and at times it was, but it was never, like, bad difficult. It was like, man, the way these families and kids change, like, even from the time they step through the door to the time they step in front of the camera, it's like they're like different people. And, like, actually, and I used to hear Matt say, like, you see, like, this sigh of relief on the parents where it's just like they feel normal for a minute. Like, I was physically seeing that, and so my wife was with me, so we both went together. She was at Sync with me, so we both went and helped. And she was, like, helping wrangle the kids and stuff. And
Right.
Like, we get done and we're driving, and we're kind of silent for a while. And I just looked at her and was like, we have to be a part of this.
Yeah.
And she's like, it was, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And so it kind of snowballed from there. And, like, never understood why he wanted me to be involved, but here we are. And
You're glad that he did.
oh yeah, because I think that's, I even contemplate, like, is this one of the ways that my work changes?
Right.
You know what I mean? How do I support this more?
Mm-hmm.
And again, you're thinking, like, sometimes you think as a business person, right? Like, I have this business I need to support, and now there's this nonprofit
Right.
that I'm thinking about dedicating time to.
Right.
I've got a family to support. They're trying to do all these checks and balances.
There's a lot of
But
spinning plates.
How does so, like I said, there's all these pieces where I feel like God's aligning, right? So I think the thought process that I've been so having about, like, how does my work change to be of more value, to be of, it's not just financial value to me. Like, how does the work literally of more value? What is value? Like, sometimes I think we have to redefine what value is.
That's a big question.
So, to me, value isn't a dollar sign, even though from a business standpoint that's important.
Right.
But what is true value is using a skill or a talent or an ability or whatever you have at your discretion,
Mm-hmm.
and impacting, like, an actual life from that.
It sounds like you just described so many angels.
Yeah.
That's
what
that's the description of it.
Right.
Right.
Because I've worked on a couple other projects. We have a local mission that does. I used to think they just did canned food drives, right? Because that's all you saw, like these big green trucks that said we feed people, and they put barrels out in grocery stores for canned food.
Right.
And so I'm like, at one point, this has been several years ago, I was like, I really want to get. It was just this desire, like, how do I use photography for something bigger than senior pictures? And as much as I love that, right? Not knocking senior photos, I love it.
Right.
But, like, how do I use it to, like, be more meaningful in some way?
Mm-hmm.
And so I met with the mission, and they were like, we could really use a photographer. We have a men's homeless shelter that we run, and we have a women's homeless shelter. We have a women's abuse center. We have a women's drug rehabilitation center, a women's drug rehabilitation center. So they start naming all these things they do for our state, right? Because it's a statewide organization. And I said, do you understand that nobody knows that you do all of that other than the people in your pipeline?
Right.
Right?
Right.
As me, and you're a charitable organization, right? You're a nonprofit.
Right.
You need the donations to continue to support all of these families in need. Me, as a potential donor, thinks by giving you canned food when we go to the grocery store that we're supporting your organization.
Right.
When that doesn't give you anything.
Right.
Right? Yeah, you give that out to families in need, but it's not. You're doing so much more.
Considering all this other stuff, right?
Right. So I actually went and created a marketing campaign for them. Mm-hmm. With that, like, didn't even tell them I was doing it. And so it was like, I came up with this concept of we know to give them. And then I did, like, a series of 5 images, and, like, one was we know abuse. And so, like, I had a girl come in, and we made her, like, all disheveled and put makeup on to do, like, the bruised eye and tried to make it, like, an actual image that evokes an emotion.
Well, and something
response,
that they
right?
legitimately deal with, and
they see this every day.
Right?
So I did a we know addiction, and I actually worked with a photographer, a really good friend of mine, who actually struggled with addiction, and so he came and modeled for that. And so I had these 5 images, and so I went and presented them to them unawares, and they were just, like, over the moon. And we ended up shooting, like, 25 more scenarios, and then they had me do projects in their boardroom, because they have this little small boardroom, and when potential donors come in, they kind of would walk them through the process. Well, their walls were full of, like, 8x10 snapshots, like, over the past, like, 30, 40 years that were just so discoherent, right? They didn't make any sense. Like, and I was like, what if we told a story on these walls of what you guys do? Because their mission wasn't just to, like, give to the community. It was, like, to transform, right? Their rehab program wasn't, it was literally, like, take them out of the addiction and rehabilitate them, and they actually give them a job, like, once they complete the program, and just providing a lifestyle change for them. So we made these series of images where And we talked to some of the guys there, and like some of the stories that people have been through are shocking.
Yeah.
Like, you know it exists, but to hear them actually say, like, I lived in in some of these conditions is shocking. And so we did these big canvases. So the first one is this huge black and white canvas of the state they were in. Like, we did one for homelessness. Mm-hmm. And so it's him out in the street, and we photographed him, on the street and laying there trying to sleep on the street. And then the next is like them working in the program. Like, one of the things they could do could work in the kitchen. So we had them like with a pot, like working in the kitchen. And then part of that they do is like they have to do like biblical study and research and all this. So we show like that transition, like reading the Bible and things like that. And then the last one is like the stories of them reunited with family that wanted nothing to do with them. And so it starts black and white, and with each panel, we increase the color by like 25%, so that ends up in full color. And so that we did a series of these around the room, and when they put those up and they talk about bringing donors in, they're like, there's like the response is so different because we don't have to explain to them what we do anymore.
Because it's right there.
Right. And it was like at that moment where I was like, that was the first thing that I had done where I was like, this can transcend like what it is.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That
like,
absolutely does.
And how do I do more of that?
Right.
So I think that's where So Many Angels has been like special to me too. Like,
well, and it's where your heart is. It's where your mind is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm picking up.
Right.
Where can people go to find out more information about you?
About me in particular?
Sure. Your website, your business.
Yeah, website, joshuahannaphotography.com. It's not the best website, but it's there. Facebook, Instagram, jhphotodesign.com.
Okay.
But I just tell people, like message me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You want to find out about me, or I would rather find out about you personally. I'd rather talk about you than talk about me, but, message me, whatever, call me, text me. It's all good. Just as long as there's like actual communication, not just Facebook stalking each other for so long.
You're not interested in that. Thanks for this.
Yeah.
I appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this. I'm excited to see what is next for you.
Me too, I think.